Hi, and welcome everybody to a bonus edition of Emergency Preparedness. It's not just about the weather. We had a great segment that we did last month, so we hope you all had an opportunity to watch that. And if not, the links will be on our Facebook page. But one of our incredible speakers last month was Sarah Schmidt, and she is with us again today to introduce our guest. I will just touch base real quick. My name is Stacey Harris. I'm the director of the core program for Naval Services FamilyLine, and we're excited to share this bonus edition with you guys, and we hope you enjoy it. So Sarah, thank you for coming back and for bringing us Heather.
Thank you, Stacey. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah, and we are continuing with our emergency preparedness series for CORE. In this smaller segment series, Preparing Kids for Emergencies, we want to focus on how to prepare children of any age, littles through teens, on disaster readiness. We want to provide you tools, tips, and resources that can help you prep as you prepare them. Let me introduce to you our next expert. She's amazing, emergency management with a focus on child care recovery, Dr. Heather Beal. She's a Navy vet, a Navy spouse, emergency manager rock star, and here she is to take it away. Heather.
Thank you, Sarah, and I'm welcome. Thank you also for listening, and I'm just so excited to be here to talk with you about something that's just so important and so near and dear to my heart. So let me get my PowerPoint up here for you. Okay, so we're talking a little bit today about the kiddos and preparing them for disaster. Okay, so who am I? So Sarah did a very nice job of introducing me, but like you, I'm a military spouse, and I've been a veteran. I've been in for 23 years. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. And when I was about to get out, my daughter was really young. My son had just been born, and I started thinking about childcare and how prepared or not it was. And to my dismay, I found out it was not very prepared for disaster. So I started Blocks. It's a nonprofit that helps prepare kiddos for disaster. And then after that, fast forward a few years to a stormy night in Maryland, if any of you've been there. And it's getting about bedtime, and I realized there's a tornado watch. So I chose the wrong time to do this, but try to broach the idea to my daughter that, hey, we may have to go into the basement. As you can imagine, it really didn't go well with the thunder and lightning in the background. So I vowed to do a better job. And I started looking for books and different resources that I could find to help have that conversation before it becomes the event. And since I couldn't find what I wanted, I started writing some of my own. So what are we going to talk about today? Just a couple of things. What is a disaster? I know you've had some background on that, but just kind of breaking it down a little bit more. They're going to talk about preparing the children themselves for disaster, some of the common obstacles, ways we can overcome those obstacles. And I'm going to give you some tools and resources to kind of help start you down that path. And I want to share a few success stories because I think it's so important to think about and to know what our kids are capable of and how much they can help themselves and others should something happen. So what is a disaster? Well, by definition, it's an event that causes great damage or loss of life. When we talk about disasters, we kind of tend to bin them into a couple categories: natural, man-made, or technological. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I also want to bring up the idea of disaster as a notice or no notice event. So the disaster types, your natural disasters, we think about earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, fires, volcanoes in Hawaii were something to think about, winter storms, pandemics, as we've all experienced in the last year and a half. Your man-made disasters, essentially caused by humans, usually hazardous material spills, terrorism, active shooter events, missing or abducted children. And you see a couple asterisks on this slide. That's there because some of these events could be caused by either more than one category. They could be natural or man-made, as far as the fire, pandemics, etc. And the important thing I want you to take away from here is technological disasters. They could be in and of themselves the disaster, or they could be the result of that man-made or natural disaster. Do you have a plan for if your utilities fail? Gas, electric, water. What about, if that happens in the summertime versus the wintertime? And communications failure. Personally, where I live now, if I don't have Wi-Fi, I have no cell phone signal, nothing. So it's something that I think about quite a bit, and I try and come up with ways that I can mitigate that. So notice versus no notice events. Some of these things we're very blessed that we have the technology to give us some heads up. Hurricanes, big storms. Sometimes we get plenty of hours to days worth of information ahead of time. Sometimes it's kind of quick building like storms when they happen. No notice events. I live out here in Washington State, earthquake country. We have two very active and significant fault lines. They haven't given it up in a while, but if they do, I'm not going to get any advance notice. So thinking about that and being prepared ahead of time is the best that I can do on that. And I think that's so important to think about. So what are the obstacles? Well, one of them is trying to avoid that little face. Something to think about. Our kids are 25% of the population here in the United States. And the United Nations estimates that over 50% of those impacted by disaster are children or youth, youth being that 18 to 25-year-old category. So with knowing that, why is there such a small focus on preparing children? I'm not really sure, but this is the first step in moving past that. So what are some of the obstacles, reasons why we don't? Well, one I call the superhero syndrome. It's not going to happen to me. I'm immune. That never happens here. Another thing we look at is it's too scary. I don't want to talk to my kid about scary things. I don't want to scare them. Sometimes it's just simply being overwhelmed. Well, where do I start? There's a lot of information out there. I don't even know where to begin. Or it's the opposite, no resources. For example, when I looked for books for my daughter, she was 3 at the time, to try and explain what a tornado was to her, there was lots of science stuff, but nothing I could find about what do you do to be safe. So how do we overcome these obstacles? And you might think, well, why in the world is she showing me pirates? Well, besides the fact these two are mine, and we celebrate International Talk Like a Pirate Day every September 19th, and I urge you and your families to do as well because it's fun. But the reality is pirates adapt. They don't give up easily. So I charge you to approach disaster preparedness like a pirate. So how do we do that? Where do we start? Have the conversation early. I know we don't like to think about that, but our children, and they're in childcare, they know what fire drills are. Every couple times a month or maybe even a couple times a year, they're doing fire drills. Some places they're doing tornado drills or other types of drills. They know what to do. They don't like it. Honestly, I don't like that loud buzzing sound of the alarm, but the kids know what to do. And it does save lives. Practice. Whatever you're going to teach them, practice it. It doesn't really sink in until it gets past just the words. It's also the action that helps make it something repeatable and something they can remember. Normalizing it. It can be done in a way that's not scary. It helps build resiliency. The reality we all need to face is that disaster is not a possibility, it's a probability. It's just a question of when. So if they're always trained that, hey, when we visit Aunt Sarah, there's tornadoes, and if there's a tornado drill, we do X and Y. And if we're visiting Aunt Amanda and they live in earthquake country, these are the things you need to know. So it doesn't make it scary, it just helps teach them what they can do to be safe. And that's the important thing I want to talk to you about, is not being scary. I know if an earthquake happened here, there's a good chance that it could be a very large one if and when it did happen. However, what I talk to the kids about is, what can you do to be safe? What are the smart choices you can make? And I remember when my daughter was young, she went with what I call the line leader phase. Mommy, I want to be in front. I want to open the door. I want to be in charge. Doing things like this helps put them in a little bit of control. They know what to do to be safe and to help their friends or to help their teacher. And that makes such a big difference because it empowers them during a situation that is not something we'd wish for our kids to ever have to face, but it gives them the ability to get through that, help themselves, and help them their friends. Another thing I teach kiddos about communication, I call it the WOW principle. If you're trying to get a hold of your kids, and this works for your older kids too, a lot of times cell phone lines and things are going to be jammed and there's not a lot of time to get information across. Focus on WOW. W, where are you? O, are you okay? Is there anyone with you? And the second W, what's next? What are you planning to do? And again, finding and using age-appropriate resources. They are out there, and I'm going to give you some of the places where you can go to find some of that information. So this is a good place for if you wanted to do a little screen capture of a few things here. So we're going to go through these one by one. Amazon, if you didn't know, you can search for disaster preparedness books for children. Now, that being said, it's not perfect. I have found how to make a grocery list under there. Sometimes things get put into weird places, but it is a really good start for trying to find things. Of course, your regular searches by subject also help, but it's there. Blocks. We help prepare childcare and children for disaster. We have resources there. We put together some lists of different books and different resources available for kids. The CDC also has a Children in Disasters page under Kids and Family. FEMA has ReadyGov, Ready Kids. And the IAM is the International Association of Emergency Managers. We have a lot of disaster resources on that page. There are some parts of the page that you have to get to if you're a member, but there's a lot that's still open to the public. Search on YouTube for PBS, What a Disaster Game Show. It is super fun to watch. The Teen CERT program, another great resource for your high school kids to be more prepared and help lead the charge in your neighborhood to help prepare the neighbors. Train for Safety Press. We write children's books for 3 to 8-year-olds, teaching them what to do just in case. And then YouTube, if you do your searches, and again, check for age appropriateness. Sometimes they tend to sneak a few things in, but there are a lot of really good things out there. I've seen FEMA's Disaster Dodgers, and there's just so many programs that are helpful, some more science-based than preparedness-based, but they're still really good resources. Depending on the age of your children, they can do a lot to help prepare and start laying the groundwork for having that conversation about the harder topics. Some of the things here, just a few more examples. Nat Geo's got some good stuff. I've seen emergency kit bingo, treasure hunts or scavenger hunts for things to help put together your go bag. And like I mentioned, different books that are available to help prepare kids for disaster. So next I want to talk to you guys about a couple of what I consider success stories of where it's all gone right. Tilly Smith. I remember this one because I remember when this event happened, but some of our younger folks might not yet, but the Indonesian tsunami in 2004. It was December 26th. This tsunami hit after a huge earthquake. 14 countries were affected, 5 million people. 1.7 million were left homeless, 500,000 injured, over 230,000 lives were lost. During all of this, there was one 10-year-old girl who remembered one geography lesson, and she saved over 100 lives. She was on vacation in Thailand with her parents and her little sister, and she looked out at the water, and it was receding and had kind of this frothy look to it. They had no indications of the earthquake, mind you, where they were at. And she just kept insisting, you know, Mom and Dad, there's going to be a tsunami. There's going to be a tsunami. Well, they didn't really believe her because it was not in their experience to ever have seen or experienced this. So they're like, yeah. And finally, Mom said, okay, take her back up to the hotel. I'll be up there in a minute. Well, she wouldn't let up. She really believed this was going to happen. And Dad finally went to the pool security guard and said, hey, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but my daughter's convinced there's going to be a tsunami. Well, that's when the pool guard turned to him and said, we just had an 8-point-something earthquake in Indonesia. The men looked at each other and they started rounding people up, brought them in from the beach. She saved lives because she knew something was wrong and wasn't going to give up until she convinced everybody else. Disaster preparedness success story. DeMonte Love, Hurricane Katrina. He was found, he's 6 years old at the time, wandering around in New Orleans, carrying his 5-month-old brother and 5 toddlers, all holding hands. Well, what had happened? Where did they come from? Well, their parents had handed them up to a rescue helicopter after being trapped inside their apartment for 4 days. Flooding, of course. They were without food, light, or air conditioning, and they just run out of milk for the baby. The air crew took the children, said they'd be back for the parents. Well, they didn't come right back. So the paramedics were told by this little boy his name. He described his parents. He gave the name of all the children with him, the school he went to, his phone number, and explained who everybody was. Well, I would guess in this case, this little boy didn't have a whole lot of preparedness, but he was taught the basic skills of family reunification as we now know it, and how to be reunited with your family by knowing that information. So that little 6-year-old kept his family and his cousins safe because he knew that's what he needed to do. Emily, this is one of my newest experiences that I'm able to share. A derecho hit Cedar Rapids, Iowa in 2020. I actually had the opposite of pleasure driving through part of that same storm with my kiddos on the Chicago side of that when we went home to see my family. So what happened? What is this? Well, South Dakota, August 10th, 2020, a storm picks up, and it continues to pick up, and it heads east. And by the time it reached Iowa, there was gusts of 140 miles per hour. The storm came on suddenly, and Emily's mom and dad were closing windows throughout the house. Next thing anyone remembers, there was a loud crack, and the 60-year-old sycamore tree outside became one with the nursery ceiling where the 6-year-old Emily and her baby sister Abby had been playing. Mom and dad found Emily and her 1-year-old sister downstairs in the basement. Emily calmly handed mom and dad flashlights and emergency rations while she continued to entertain her little sister. Well, how did she do this? She had recently found online, we call it the Great Cascadia Zombie Challenge. It's a Girl Scout program for emergency preparedness. And as a Daisy Girl Scout, a kindergartner, she learned everything she needed to know about preparing a go bag and how to keep her pet safe and the family safe and what to do if something happened. She knew something was wrong, so she took her sister downstairs. She saved their lives because she knew what to do. It's just amazing what these children can do if we give them the tools. So again, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. Continue to talk with your kids, empower them. They can save everyone around them and make a difference in the world. I truly, truly believe that. Thank you.
Okay, Heather, I as you were telling those last stories about the children, I had chills. I wish I was as prepared as those children are, because what's so unique about children is when you actually prepare them, it does take away some of the fear, and it gives them that just the drive to go do something. And I think sometimes as adults, we let the fear overwhelm what our knowledge should be, what the habits should be that we're doing. So very inspirational to hear about all those kids. I appreciate that. Sarah, thank you for connecting us with Dr. Heather Beal. This was just such a great, it truly is a bonus edition for us for our emergency preparedness program that we're doing. Information was fantastic. We'll be sure to be sharing this out on our social media pages, and appreciate all your time. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and stay tuned. So throughout the month of June, we are going to be having more tips and advice to share with you as we talk about living a prepared military life. So thank you again, Heather and Sarah. I appreciate your time and all this fabulous information. Have a great day.